Back with you. I'm Pastor Anita of For His Glory Global Ministries. Have you ever wanted the scriptures to open up to you? Well, on today's program, I hope that I have people who are research students because this program is really going to be amazing. Well, we're going to be sharing research, how to research the Word, and it's going to add and help you learn the Word in depth. Today I have a special guest. Her name is Magiera. She's an ordained minister, founder of Light of the Word Ministry. She has been a language student since childhood. Jan fell in love with the Aramaic language, and it has allowed her to translate the Aramaic Peshitta New Testament. Jan has also authored topical books on biblical subjects. You can go to lightoftheword.org to see her other books and order them. They're also available on Kindle and Amazon. I would like to welcome Reverend Jan Magiera.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so excited to have you here. It's just a huge blessing for me to be able to have you here on our show and be able to see you again. And I'd like to talk about your book because that was a lot of work, and I know. So the thing that I would like to know is, what is the Peshitta, the Aramaic Peshitta New Testament, and why is it valuable to use?
Well, it's the primary manuscript of the Aramaic language, and I believe it was the original language that the New Testament was written in primarily. I mean, most people believe that it was Greek, and I'm sure that it was translated to Greek immediately right away. But the people like Matthew, Mark, all of the gospel writers, Paul, they were all Eastern people, and they spoke Aramaic. And so that was their first language. And if they spoke Greek, then they would also have, learned how to communicate in that language too. But they basically were always thinking in this Eastern language of Aramaic. And that intrigued me from the beginning to want to know, okay, well, what is it? And why is it so different? And it's because it's a very picturesque language, and there are verb actions that underlie all kinds of concepts. And when I first started learning that, then I got so excited because I guess my mind sort of paints pictures anyway, or I think in pictures. And so it communicated to me. But anyway, the Peshitta is a specific manuscript. That's the primary one that even still the Eastern churches use.
Wow. And so how would it help, a student open up the Word and be able to see the treasure that's in that verse?
There are subtle differences with the if you studied King James a lot, you can get used to the vocabulary, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when you start studying and reading the Aramaic version, you get the flavor of the way the people thought.
Oh, wow.
And so, because we are Western people, and we think with more of a concentrated mind, we have to be very analytical most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Well, but in the Eastern way of thinking, everything is fluid. It'd be like saying, let's see, something about, like, God is love, all right? Mm-hmm. How can he be love and then do these things and whatever? There's lots of questions like that. Mm-hmm. Because in our Western minds, that's a contradiction. There's a contradiction sometimes. But in an Eastern way of thinking, God can be love, but he can still be a disciplined father too. And so anyway, I think that the primary reason to read this version is just to have a contrast so that your mind can wake up and go, oh, I never really thought about it like that before.
Okay, that's good. Well, what's the difference between the Eastern and Western Peshitta?
There are two separate manuscripts. Around the 4th century, the church split, and the Eastern side decided that they would change their script, the way the words were written.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a different language, it's the same language, but it's just a different script.
Okay, wow.
And they pronounce it now a little bit differently too, but the words are still the same.
Okay, so if you could give us some examples of the database and how it got started, just...
Well, when I first started studying the language, there were very few books. I had a copy, like just a photocopy of the first lexicon that I used, and everything had to be done by hand. So I think my first word study took me about 3 months to do because I had to look it up, every single word and every verse, and try to figure out where it was in the manuscript and everything. So it was quite the adventure. But after a period of time, I realized that there were 2 older translations of the New Testament that were done in 1850. One of them was by a man named James Murdoch, and the other one is by J.W. Etheridge. But they were, old-fashioned and quite difficult to read sometimes. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could have a modern English translation of this beautiful language?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started playing around with how to do it, and there were some other people that I knew that I was working with at the time who helped to start it too. And so that just became a vision of mine to make this available for people to study. So over the years I've developed interlinear and a concordance and a lexicon and all the books and things that you need to study the language with. Wow.
So that question kind of led me to ask this next question, which is, you and I were talking and you were telling me about the miracle that God performed for you. And I would like for you to share that with our viewers because that was phenomenal.
It was amazing. So it was around 2000 and I had been working on the database. It was an Access database. And I'd been changing it and really doing a lot of work on it for about 6 months, and I had not backed up my computer. So that, that was bad to begin with, but the hard drive crashed.
Oh, God.
And at that point, the database was about 198 megabytes. I had put in every single word. It was all numbered with a numbering system, and I started to use it to help translate a lot of the verses. And anyway, so when the hard drive crashed, I told God, I said, oh no, there is no way I'm going to be able to recover this and reproduce all that work. And so I told him, I said, if you want me to continue to do this, there's going to need to be a really big miracle here. And I went to bed that night just not even knowing for sure whether I was going to continue doing anything with this. It was a real crossing point, because I couldn't have recovered it. And so the next morning I woke up and the Lord told me, he said, don't touch anything. except turn the computer on. So I turned it on, and what had been, I knew where the file was, and it was down to like 5K. There was nothing in the file at all.
Wow.
And he goes, just watch. Don't touch anything, don't do anything, just watch. And before my eyes, the entire database was restored.
Wow.
198 megabytes. I saw it just go, get to the whole thing. And then when he said I could open it, it was all there.
Wow.
And of course I backed it up really fast. Because I never recovered a lot of those other files that were on that computer. And that was the only one that was recovered.
Wow.
So then I said, okay, oh my goodness, that means that I need to finish this. So it took me till 2006 to finish the translation, and then 2009 was about when I did all the other books.
So when did you start this? What year?
1979.
And it took you till 2006.
Well, it's
Wow.
because computers were not really...
Yeah, they're not where they are now.
My first computer had a 40 megabyte floppy drive, and so, yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of work.
But God is faithful. He's
He
so
sure
wonderful to teach me things. Every time I needed to know something, there would be the answer. There would be a way to do it when it didn't seem like there would be any way.
Well, the other thing is he saw your heart, to want to put the work in so that others could be blessed to be able to see how Matthew and Mark and the other apostles thought with the Eastern mindset, opposed to the way we think now. That was so phenomenal. He's so good,
That's for sure.
And the thing that people need to remember is God numbered every hair on our head. And he is so intricate and so detailed, and his word says that he cares about the desires of our hearts. So it's not far-fetched to believe that he would do something like that for you. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately he gets the glory for it.
Right. He did definitely get the glory for that one.
That was really good. So the other question I have is, can you explain how the other volumes work together with this one?
Well, I designed a numbering system for every root word and then each dictionary number. And once the word had its number, then I keyed everything in the database to that number. So instead of having to take years like I did to learn this language, even though it's not a really very difficult language to learn, it's still, got a funny script, and you have to learn how to read the letters and everything. It's very similar to Hebrew. So if a person knows Hebrew, then they could learn it very easily. But anyway, once the numbering system was set up, then the computer actually generated the books, because I could key it to print every verse under that number where that word appeared, and that's the concordance. And then I keyed the dictionary, the definitions of the word to that number, so you can find out other ways that the word is translated, just like a regular Greek lexicon. And then the interlinear I set up as a vertical interlinear, where it reads it in columns instead of across. And so you can go to, there's 3 volumes, and you can go to whatever book you want to look for and find the verse, and then you can find what the number is for that word that you want to study. And then you go and search the word and do a word study on it. So it makes it really easy, and you don't really need to know that much about the grammar or the vocabulary or anything when you have all those tools. It's just like Greek. You can study Greek that way too, or Hebrew.
Wow. And how long did it take you to get the other books?
I finished most of those in 2009. So once the database was pretty well done, then it produced all the books all at the same time.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know, I saw that, I read some of the reviews that people gave you for taking the time to do all of that, and they just raved about how all the books work together and how well put together all of it is, and how blessed they were to own it. And I also saw that you had mentioned the NASB, that it will work with the NASB, the was it New King James, or in the EVS?
ESV.
ESV, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you can use any translation with it. It's my translation is available in BibleWorks, which they're no longer producing, but the file itself is available to purchase for Sword Searcher and the Word and eSword.
Okay.
So you can have the translation that way too.
So do you have a favorite Bible that you like to use?
A favorite other than mine, you mean?
Well,
No,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I use English Standard Version a lot
a lot. Oh,
because I believe it's very accurate and also easy to understand. So.
and what do you think about the NASB?
It's also very accurate, but it's a little bit harder to use for teaching. It's a little stodgier, you know. It sounds, it's not as fluid when you're reading it. It's great for study, though.
And the Amplified?
That's always good for reference.
Yeah, wow. Can you also share a little bit about your ministry?
Sure. Light of the Word is really what the Lord showed me was to be the title, because it would bring understanding about various things like the Bible customs and figures of speech, and also, you know, the understanding of the Aramaic language. But I just love the Word in any form or fashion. So I love to go teach and do seminars and take topics and really develop them and just show a lot of the depth of the Word. And I got into studying the old pictographs of the original Semitic alphabet. And so one of the books that I have is called The Fence of Salvation, and it's about the Hebrew and Aramaic word pictures. And it shows how if you know a Hebrew word in the Old Testament, then you can find the sister or cognate word in the New Testament in Aramaic, and then you'll be able to trace a concept from Genesis all the way to Revelation.
Wow.
And
Wow.
So a lot of really difficult concepts that we have trouble in Christianity explaining become really simple when you know what the word pictures are.
Wow.
And we were talking earlier about an example is reconciliation, because that's a hard concept to explain or talk about, really. But God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, right? So it's important that we know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And when when you know what the word is, it's from Rhea, and that's a Hebrew word as well as an Aramaic word, and it means to shepherd or to tend or to feed.
Mm-hmm.
And so when God's talking about how in Christ he reconciled the world to himself, it's that he wanted to shepherd them. He wanted to be the one to tend and to feed them. And so he brought them to himself so that that could happen.
Wow. Wow.
And we get our word pastor from that too, actually. A pastor is a shepherd. He's one who tends and feeds.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of other work that goes into to being a pastor. It's just really...
That's for sure.
It's really a blessing to be able to come alongside people and, you know, help them understand the Word and help them live the Word and, you know, so they can be blessed to be a blessing, to go out and utilize the ministry of reconciliation, because, you know, how are other people going to get to the Word if we're not out sharing it and witnessing and bringing people back to God?
Mm-hmm.
So when did you decide that you wanted to have your ministry?
I started it in 1998.
And you still have it going till this day. And
It's been a very fun journey.
yeah. Well, you know, the thing is that to be able to have you as a friend and to know how you feel about the Aramaic and talking about an invaluable source of reference is just because it takes a lot of time to sit down and do what you did. And I just want people to know how precious that is, you know, and all the time that you took putting into this translation and all the other books. You know, I wanted to write a book, and that's where it is. I wanted to write it. I just sat there and thought, but I don't even know where to start. You know, I don't know how all that works. And then here you are. You have all these books, and what does it just flow out of you, or you know, how do they come about to you?
Well, they are things. The books that I'm writing now are things that I've studied over the years and found really treasures that I wanted to communicate to people. So the one I'm working on right now is about the names and titles of Jesus Christ. And so, yeah, that'll be a fun one.
Wow.
From Aramaic, you know, from the way to understand it. So.
Yeah, I remember. I remember a person saying something like, "If you tell me what you know about Jesus Christ, I can tell you how far you're going to go." And the thing about it is so vital for us to understand how important it is that we look like Christ. Because I see Christians at times who believe that being arrogant and prideful and having those different attributes, you know, some confuse confidence with arrogance. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for a humble person or a meek person, some people think that being humble and meek equals weak.
And it isn't.
And it isn't, because that was Christ. You know, he stood up when he needed to, but on the norm, he was humble. Mm-hmm. And
God gives grace to the humble.
Yeah, I looked up a lot of, I did a word study on humble, and the verses, you know, how he would uplift the humble. and what he does with the proud. And we just need to spend more time in the Word, understanding Christ, and wanting to look more like him than the world. Because if we look like the world, how are we going to win people to Christianity? You know, it's a big deal. And in today's society, with what we're seeing, we need to be anchored in the Word, because that's where your safe haven is. That's where no matter what goes on, no matter what's thrown at you, if you've made the Word your own and have saturated yourself in it, there's no reason to fear. You know,
Right.
Look how many times God says, "Let not your heart be troubled. Do not be afraid," over and over and over. You know, when you're with your own parents, when you were a kid, you knew if something happened where to go to be safe. And that's the way we need to be with our Father, knowing that, you know, He has us, and He'll protect us no matter what, as long as we're faithful.
That's right.
So
There's a great verse in Hebrews I can share with you that is one of my favorites. It's Hebrews 13:5. And the last part of it says, "For the Lord has said, I will not leave you and I will not let go of you." And the literal of that verse in Aramaic is, "My hands will not go slack for you." In other words, he won't let his hands just hang down and do nothing.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm very thankful that you took the time to come and share your hard work with us, and I'm believing that people will go to your website and order this book, because it's invaluable. It's one of the best resources that you can have to open up the Word, and I'm just very thankful, and I look forward to seeing you here again. And Father, I just want to thank you for Jen and her work. I thank you that you bless her and everything that she's doing, and I thank you for the viewers being blessed.